Can we start? Okay, so welcome everybody. It's great that you are here. The session is about TPUs or transport interchanges, as they call it in English. And we think it's a very important topic because in general, in the world, there's been a progressive shift away from the automobile towards public transport. It's something that is happening all over the world, from sub-Saharan Africa to car-dominated environments in California or in the Emirates. So in that sense, I think public transport has become a major component in our city, if not the main component. To which the issues of interchange hubs becomes very important. I think, and Jared will talk at length about it, we will talk at length about it, things have changed. Thinking of providing destination everywhere for everybody is becoming not feasible, and hence the importance of having interchange hubs where multimodal interchange can happen in between different transport systems and in between, for instance, underground lines or train and undergrounds. The importance of these interchange hubs are vital because they are an incredible important part of our transit journey. Interchange hubs have been for a lot of time held responsible for being a problem, interchanging being the problem of a public transport trip. Nowadays, I think there is a new generation of projects that are addressing transport interchange hub in a completely different way as an opportunity to actually enhance the trip of anybody who is using transit, but also to generate value by locating retail framework on generous footfall, which is the footfall of interchange hubs, and also try to do land value capture by locating new buildings that are within the close proximity of the interchange hub. This is very important because it is basically a sort of mind shift, and we've been seeing this happening a lot also here in Moscow, because it's not becoming just a point of connection from a transit standpoint, but it's also a land sort of master plan opportunity. It's a possibility to envisage also a very important part of the city. So we have a very interesting panel here. We have basically to the far left Jared Walker, who joined us at the very last minute. He's possibly the most important transit consultant in the world and the author of Human Transit, which is like say I would say the most relevant book in our field when it comes to transit network. Then we have Ruben. It's difficult for me to pronounce the surname, but I'll try. Arakelian is a guy that I know from a long while. Is a very important architect. He's a great architect, and he will talk about Pavelskaya Transit Hub. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. I did my best. Then we have Ilya Petushkov. Ilya Petushkov is a senior transit consultant, who is a senior transport consultant at Mobility in Chain, and he's been working on several TPUs, and I think it's going to be very interesting to have his comment on his experience on those projects. And we have also Andrea Boschetti, who was through his firm called Metrogramma, the firm that produced the Milan master plan. And the Milan master plan was heavily relying on transit systems, and he will take us through some projects, in fact one, which is now being implemented in Milan, which is actually a TPU. And then we have Andrei Maligin, that is actually very interesting for us because he is the end of the line, in the sense that he is the guy who actually introduces and generates and produces TPUs. From him, we are expecting to understand what are the real challenges when it's time to actually implement TPUs to make them happening, especially here the challenges for the Russian market. So I would suggest that we start with Jared, thanking again for having him here, and The floor is yours. You don't need the flicker because there are no slides, so you don't need to turn any slides.
Thank you very much, Federico. And I know we're all very visual, and I know we came here to see pretty pictures, and so I apologize that I don't have any. I was confirmed for this. We confirmed that I was available for this panel about 15 minutes ago. But I'm delighted to be here. Earlier today, for most of today, I was in workshops at the Department of Transport where we're working on reimagining your bus system in Moscow. And bus services are also often something that are neglected. Often powerful people feel that bus services aren't very important or aren't very exciting, but buses turn out to be the essence of how public transport succeeds for the overwhelming majority of people. And if you don't live in Moscow, if you're visiting and you've heard that the Moscow Metro is all you would ever need, that it's one of the most fantastic rail systems in the world, that's certainly true. But as soon as you start trying to get around in this city, you will discover that you need buses, you need trams, and that many of the bus services in the city are fantastically useful. A year ago, 2 years ago, over a year ago, I was honored to work with the Moscow Department of Transport on what is now called the Magistral project. Magistral was a project to reorganize the buses in the center of Moscow, the area inside what we call the Garden Ring, the inner 4 or 5 kilometers of radius. And we were able to reorganize those buses to be fantastically more useful, fantastically more frequent, without spending very much money. And it was really a matter of rearranging services that were there that were too complicated. And I'll talk a little bit about why bus services tend to get complicated. Now, when we lay out a transport line, even a bus line, we have a basic conflict or a basic pressure, which is that nobody will ever write to the mayor or come to a meeting and say, I really want you to make me change buses, or I really want you to make me change trains. Nobody will ever write to the mayor saying that. And so there's often the pressure, especially with bus planning where so many people aren't paying as much attention, to say, okay, Mrs. Pavlova over here, you go over there, so we'll run a bus line that does that. Oh, you go over there, we'll run a bus line that does that. And before you know it, you have 1,000 bus lines all on top of each other. And you look at a map of the bus network and it's incomprehensible because there are 24 numbers on every segment and you can't figure out what the buses do. And what's more, when we run that many bus lines on top of each other, we end up not being able to afford to run any of them very frequently, so they don't come when you need them to come, so they're not very useful, so not many people use them. And so this is the process by which a habit of just designing one bus route at a time, which is also, by the way, the habit of falling in love with one rail project at a time or one road project at a time. The focus on just one piece that we're going to do now can cause you to lose track of the fact that nothing that we do in transport makes sense unless it makes sense as a network. And if you want services to fit together as a network, then you need the glue that fits them together, you need the means of fitting them together, and that is called interchange, which is what we're going to talk about today. The station is as important as the line. You would not build roads without ramps to get on and off them, and public transport only functions through interchange. Because when we have robust interchange, when we make it easy to get off of one bus or train and get on to another, suddenly every line that serves that point is vastly more useful to vastly more people. Because now I'm no longer trapped on the particular line that I'm on, only able to go to places up and down that line. Now every time this line crosses another line, I can go there, and I can go there, and I can go there. And a very well-designed network, such as we're trying to create for Moscow, does that. It is only through frequent lines with connections to other lines, that we can build a network that will take you wherever you want to go in the city. Often in transport planning, we hear conversations about, well, these people are going there, and these people are going there, and these people are going there, as though we as planners should really be deciding where people can go. And what a robust network based on interchange can do is it can get you to the point where you're not asking those questions anymore, because you've designed a network that's good for going wherever people want to go, and you want people to have the freedom to go wherever they want to go rather than to just where you think they are going. You want to have that you want to give that power to the citizen, and that only happens when we have a network where the lines connect with each other robustly so that you can get wherever you're going. Now, we're all used to how this works in the metro. Sometimes it's a long walk underground, but it's very clear we know what we're doing in the metro. But when the metro touches the bus system, or when the buses touch each other, I often notice in Moscow that we have not a very good experience, and not an experience that's very clear and easy to navigate. Forgive my pronunciation, but I will give you one example, which is the Planiernia station out in the northwest, where you come to the end of a metro line, you get off, and there is a giant bus hub behind a fence. And you can't walk to the bus hub because there's a fence between the train and the bus hub. And the purpose of this fence is to make you walk 3 times as long through that shopping center in order to get to the bus. This is very nice for the shopping center. It is not good for your freedom and opportunity. It is not good for your public transport system if you want your public transport system to actually succeed for your city. That's an example of the kind of thing I find all the time. The larger caution is simply that when you are imagining any line in a public transport network, you must be careful of that notion that this is your project limit around this station, and that you don't have to worry about what happens beyond that limit. That's a construction way of thinking, but it's not a planning way of thinking. It may be an engineering way of thinking when you're down at the project level, but you have to make sure that whatever we do, we're thinking about how it fits into an entire network that helps people go wherever they want to go. And the critical thing that makes that a pile of lines into a network is the task of interchange, the task of making it easy to get off one vehicle and onto that vehicle, which is what we're here to talk about today. So I really appreciate the opportunity to give a little introduction to this work, and look forward to hearing from everyone.
Jared, thanks a lot. I was kind of thinking of giving questions after each talk, but I think maybe it's better if we go through the discussion and then we have questions coming from the floor. Now I think I would prefer to have not Ruben but Ilya, because I think it's more consistent with the work and the narrative from Jared, and then after Ilya we will have Ruben. So Ilya, please go ahead. I don't know, do you have do you have the flicker? No, I have it. Hold on. Here, please.
Добрый день, коллеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is an honor for me to be at this event in such a great city. I'm from Moscow, so it's a double pleasure for me to be able to talk to you about the city. And indeed, I would like to continue on what Jared has just said. Why we're talking about the interchanges, why it is so important, why it is a dedicated category of transport infrastructure, because interchanges do allow to go from a line to a network. It allows us to go from A to B seamlessly, and our company, Mobility in Chain, does pretty much that. We create among other things, networks and interchanges. This is an illustration of a project we did in Luanda, in the capital of Angola. And this is the map of the future transport system of the city. And it is very frequently the case that interchanges appear in places where the road networks connect. And this is very important because road network is very often in conflict with the public transport network. And this is one of the tasks city planners and urban planners have to tackle. Because, you know, the space, the surface in a city is always limited. And in places where a lot of pedestrian flows and transport flows interconnect, you will always have a conflict that has to be tackled. The clicker doesn't work apparently. Well, this is an example of an interchange. For instance, it can be a big railway station or a big bus station. And as public transport transports a lot of people, a lot more than private vehicles can transport, we inevitably see housing growing. So retail, housing, offices grow around, and again, when we have more housing, more offices and more retail, we need more transport to deliver, to transport all those people who want to come to these places. And transit oriented at development is probably the best term for this approach. There is no equivalent for the moment in Russian. It is great that we have architects in the panel. I'm not an architect, so I always admire such projects. You know, public transport and transport is something that is part of our life. We travel every day, commute every day somewhere, and it is great that we have such a great metro network, and it is very important to have great interchanges as well. Interchanges are an important part of the architectural assets of a city, and you have to have a special treatment towards this kind of sites. This is why in Moscow we invite the best architects to work on such projects. We as urban planners, we plan transport flows, and one of the tools we use is called the pedestrian modeling, which allows to check how flows move, where to have bottlenecks. I'm sure you've used the ring road, the ring line of the metro, and you all know that the access to the platform is located in the center of the platform, while there are no entrances to this platform in the end. So this is why in the circular line you always have a lot of people in the center of the trains and very few people in the ends. Once you plan it, once you do this, it's very difficult to change it. So this is why urban planners are needed, actually. And pedestrian planning is one of the tools that allows architects and engineers to see things they could not foresee beforehand. And this is a screenshot from a video that one can make to imagine, to simulate how passenger flows would move. Legion software is one of them, for instance. I also wanted to talk about other types of interchanges, because when we talk about interchanges in Moscow, people imagine a huge metro station with a lot of office buildings, a lot of flat blocks, and a lot of retail. So they always imagine a huge infrastructural site. But actually, interchanges can be different. Any place where people change from one transport to another or from one bus to another is already an interchange. For instance, around the metro stations, there are always bus stations, and people change from metro to buses, but at the same time you have chaotic retail construction, and for instance, our company participated in the refurbishment of the space around 15 metro stations, and well, at the Ploshchad Ilyicha station, when we started working there, we found out that there are a lot of unused road space, or there is a strange asphalted triangle which is used for chaotic parking. And you know that if you've been there, that the space around the metro station does require renovation.
And also, we don't need here investments. The measures which work with so in a linear way, and we can here achieve a lot of things. And I think here policy should be of high quality. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a speech here.
Leave Ruben to explain his project for Pavelyovskaya. Sorry about that. I've been there several times, but I will never learn how to pronounce it. So, Ruben, please.
It's okay. Всем добрый день.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Can you also switch on the presentation? So now, if we're speaking about interchange hubs, these hubs are very important because they are linked with a lot of traffic of people and density. So when this traffic is concentrated, this is of course because of urbanization. I would like to mention about three key things, I think, first of all, network. We know that now urban environment, this is not even billions, but mostly flows or traffic. And this is, you know, here we have density and we have a lot of trajectories of people and transport. We have the project of Pavelyetskaya Square, and there are so many different crossings of traffic. Here you can see anything and everything here: buses, railway stations, public transport, commuters coming here to Pavelyetskaya station. Here we can see Pavelyetskaya Square and Pavelyetskaya railway station. There is a hub, and there is crossing of a lot of different traffic, and we need to develop the system. We need to implement a new project because this will be new. So this will be work of our engineers. And now at Pavelyetskaya station we can see some kind of chaos. There are many different types of traffic, and they are not well structured. That's why it seems to be so chaotic. This is our master plan. You can see the Paveletsky station here. This is the station. If we speak about our system, we can see the material implementation, but the city decided that the station should not be built too much. There should not be so many buildings, and we need to make all this traffic underground, and there should be some kind of emptiness on the station. Here we differentiated flows. These are the flows of radial and circle lines of Paveletsky subway, and then traffic from airports, the Domodedovo airport, and then flows of just citizens and visitors of this place, and then public transport. It was important for us to develop these flows in this place. Then organism is important in the system, because any structure, any site, any building can equal a human body, and here the structure is important. You can see that we analyzed this body, and we see now how this flows across. The station itself, it's an empty place, a park. We made a concept of an underground city when a person, without going to the city, without going out to the street, he can get all accomplishments of the infrastructure. I can go downside, I can go to the subway, get the bus, and I can go to the hotel, so without going to the street. But this is -1. It's underground. People don't go upwards, but still people can get all accomplishments of the city. And then here logistics is very simple. Logistic access and public access. In the project, you can see all points of access highlighted by blue. These are logistics of all this body. And then city environment is important. Transport system also should be important. We wanted to have the transport underground, and we so some kind of guided this project with parks. And the last thing, it's an image, it's a character, because this is an engineering structure, and the image is important. In our bureau, we try to use this model. In the center, this is the Paveletsky station and the surroundings, and it's like an old city, and it's underground, and above you can see it. These are like slopes, and the slopes form identity of the city. The square should not be just a park, a chaotic park. It should have also its features. These are like concrete slopes, and this is like a horizontal home above the city, but it has some peaks, so higher slopes, and these slopes, these small hills, they also disguise the transport underneath. You can see here again the small hills, and they are also important. Also, new terminal will be created for the trains. We want to make the building hybrid building, and the view of this underground square. So here you can see this is the hub which gathers different traffic. So here we can have all traffic. This is the first one, and secondly, the image should be also important. It should be modern. It should look modern. Thank you very much.
interesting. I think it proves that you know, it's about functional design. It's about arranging and rearranging hubs, but also how to visualize it and how to make the experience of the interchange a great experience. Now I leave the floor to Andrea, who will talk about his experience in Milan.
Ciao a tutti. Good afternoon. Listen me? Yes. I want to move exactly from this technical point from the project directly to another spirits of soul of interchange. Interchange hubs are places where multiple flows of vehicles and people intersect and exchange. In other words, city. So I want to answer to the importance of the interchange inside the city, showing one of our works job we did in Milano, like Metrogramma. So the big master plan of Milano, I was the chief architect from 2008 to 2012. Because I think it's really important to understand the relationship from interchange hubs and services and mobility and also I think green. In other words, common space, public space, common space, public space, quality and priority. So I try to explain the strategy of the master plan of Milano in few words. It's not simple, but I will try. So in this map, you can see 4 different maps to understand a little bit the morphology of Milano. The first, you find the density of the population. On the top left, on the top right, the density of the transportation, down left, the density of the services, and the right down, the density of the green. This is typical GS map, also we did with mobility in chain, but it's important to understand how, from which point we start to do our job. So this is the 3 most important strategy for our works. In the first, you can see. So we start from these 3 points. The first point is important to understand because we want to move from the monocentric city like Milano actually is to the multi-center city. The second point is to pass to move from the radiocentric city to typical grid city. And the third point is from fragment city to the permeable city. So it's really important because the goals of the politically are typical. So they want one city much more attractive, much more livable, much more efficient. But what is important to understand that we didn't want to expand the city more. So we want to work inside the city. So this is one of the first sketch that we did for Milano, in which you find in the black the big area to transfer that the government needs to transform inside the city of Milano. But we want to work in 2 ways, 2 important ways. One is the big strategy, the big scale of the transformation, so the macro macro area in which we want to improve, want to begin the transformation. And the second way is the micro city, so the small, the neighborhood, the district, because also in this small part of city in the city, could be, it's important to understand what is an interchange hubs. So I think from this point we can speak in a little bit more about these two ways. So the first is the big, the strategy of the large scale, so in which we find the industrial, dismantled industrial areas and the railways depots. It's really important square meter inside of Milano, and we want to transform this occasion in an occasion to all the city. So we call it this strategy epicenters because we want to transfer the goals of the environment, the environment, the development of this area to all the city. And we want to find a new drivings of the city. This is the results also of this first diagram of changing, because in where you find very well the relationship from all this big area inside the city. So not like island, but connect in a grid. In the big area, the big interchange hubs, we don't want how say give like guide rules exactly the morphology of the future of the city, but we want just fix some guide rule about the public interest. For sure services, for sure mobility, and for sure green. How much quantity, where, and which kind of condition. And after we wanted to leave free the next step of the project. This is the exactly the schematic general plan of Milano, and this is the first drawings of the results. This is one example of one big area. Exactly, it's the Scalo di Porta Romana. It's railway depots, in where now stay nothing. Stay the train and the one big wall around this island area, because where inside the people can't go inside, but can use like city, and now it's a part exactly of the city. And this is some example scenarios of the transformation of this big area. But like I told you, it's really important also the second way of strategy. So the small points inside, so the micro transformation inside, the micro transformation inside the city. And exactly in this diagram you can see, for example, on the right side, the area of Scalo Romano, we already saw 1 second ago, and others small project, but really important like the interchange hubs, because we're speaking about, for example, this is the existing, for example, yesterday, and now with the project we're speaking about green, with about new walkability, about so new quality of public space. A little example about this, because this is all the part in south of Milano, but we have we found it more of 14, 5 big project with inside much more of 18 under small project to do. So this is the strategy that we did and we made for the general plan of Milano, and this is some results now, the work in progress of the transformation, because now are much more of 5 years ago this work, and now it's already improved the changing. This is, for example, the the area of Porta Romana, in where now stay the transformation of the Prada Foundation, a new museum of OMA, of REM, Colas. This, for example, it's another important project, Garibaldi Repubblica. This is 15 years ago, and now with this politically and this changing strategy, this is the results of the transformation. But also I think the mobility and the opportunity to share with much more common space and public space, the actually mobility of cars. So this is Porta Ticinese, and this is the changing actually today. This is another example. So, thank you.
Thanks. I think it proves that when thinking about TPU interchange, you have to take a broader picture, how those fits into a city that sometimes maybe we feel is a little missing here in Moscow. And then Andrei, I will also try to pronounce your bureau, which is Mosking Projekt, will take us through the challenges of taking this fanciful thinking of new reconfigurations and new architectural design into realities and the challenges here in Moscow. Thanks.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about our plans. Well, I represent MUF'17 Project, which is a big construction and development holding. We are implementing more than 140 projects, a lot of flagship projects like the construction of metro, the construction of the infrastructure that goes along with the metro. We also build interchanges and roadways and a lot of city highways, and we also do multimodal interchanges. We are one of the companies that implement this city program for creating 170 interchanges. Well, around the metro stations, our company does all the work, while if we talk about the metro and the railroad stations, it is the metro state company and the Russian railways that are responsible for the development of these projects. We are responsible for the development of the city design regulations. We're also devising the technical requirements for the interchanges. In terms of the requirements of the passenger flows and other factors. Of course, every interchange is unique because you have different amount of housing around the interchanges. You have different types of use of the land around the interchanges. So, of course, we try to take into account this future model of, for instance, the increasing passenger flow. And of course, we try to take into account all these new requirements for the interchanges. The interchanges create several challenges for us, or several goals. We have to guarantee passengers are comfortable changing from one mode of transport to another. And of course, this requires us to build new infrastructure in the interchanges. We have to create park and ride parkings, and we have to build new roads, new access roads. We have to build auxiliary facilities that help us to increase the comfort of the passengers, but there is another goal as well. Taking into account that the city infrastructure is quite saturated, we have to somehow decongest the networks, and we have to also take into account the retail, the housing, and the office spaces that are developed around the interchanges. And of course, this helps us to develop the polycentrical model of the city, which would help us to avoid everything to be concentrated in the center of the city. We would like to make it the way that residents and visitors can spend as little time as possible when going from one point into another, when commuting from their homes to their workplaces. And when solving this task of reducing the commuting distance, we attract new investments into the city, we improve the image of the city, we improve the look of the city, and it helps the city to get back the investments they made. You know, the city invests quite a lot of money today into the creation of this infrastructure because the city administration does understand all the challenges the city faces. But of course, it does not exclude the necessity for attracting investments, for increasing the efficiency and the return on investment. So when creating interchanges, we split the technological part and the commercial part. At the same time, it is clear that it is quite challenging to put in place such a project of an interchange. There are a lot of interests that overlap, and in the end, it was decided to finance the functional infrastructure, the transport infrastructure, via the municipal state money, and to finance the commercial part via private money, offering such parts on a tender. The winners of the tenders, in some cases, have to also perform or construct the functional areas. In those cases where the commercial areas overlap with the functional areas, the overall investments from the city accounts for, or would suppose 300,000 sites would be built, and it would account for hundreds of billions of rubles. Summing up the commercial investments, the private investments, that's over 1 trillion rubles. The return on this investment would be made via lending renting this new space via taxes that the city would get after new jobs are created. We also think that the new infrastructure would improve the transport capacity and transport functions at least twofold, and it would create at least 250,000 new jobs, which means new taxes would flow into the budget. Well, I can go into more detail during the Q&A session. The only thing I wanted to show you were 2 interchanges out of the 70 we're building. They're not all made as a building. Some of them are just simple interchanges. Well, this interchange is probably the most complex ones, technologically wise and functionally wise, because railway, metro lines, bus lines would interconnect there. Private vehicles would also be connected to this interchange. Due to the fact that a metro line would pass through this interchange, commuters would be able to change from one transport to another directly. The example of the Plenary station is a very good example of what doesn't have to be done. We'll try to learn the lessons of this Plenary station and make it really easy for the commuters to go from one transport to another without even going to the street. So the commuters and the passengers would be able to change from the railway to the transport, to the public transport of the city. There will also be an access to the Moscow Central Circle. Buildings and roofs would be provided to cover passengers from rain and snow. The overall area is of 300,000 square meters. This is a flagship project for us. It actually incarnates the complexity of the possible complexity of such projects. I would also present a similar project. This is how it is going to look like. At least this is our vision of what we want to make in the end. The design phase is almost finished. So this is quite close to what we're going to have in the future. And the second project is the Lermontovsky Prospect interchange, also quite a complex project. Metro is connected with other modes of transport. Without going outside, you can go either to a shopping mall or you can change to a different transport line. 43,000 square meters of buildings, which includes a mall and an infrastructural area. So these two projects are an example of what we're doing. These are the most complex projects. There are simpler projects, of course, but all in all, our goal is to create interchanges that are as comfortable as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrei. It's very interesting to see the scale of the things that are happening in Moscow and the complexity that you have to deal with when it comes to interchanges. I'm sure there will be plenty of questions, but before we move on to the questions, I'd like to introduce Ekaterina Lapkovskaya, that from the Chief Authority for Implementation and Urban Development of Transit Infrastructure. We're very happy to have you here. I don't know if somebody can give her a mic, because we would also like to ask you what is your take on the complexity of to construct and manage interchange hubs here in Moscow. So, do you have a mic? Do you have a microphone?
Можно микрофончик принести Екатерине? Несут.
It's on the way.
Сейчас принесут.
Mike is on the way. Well, the speakers already mentioned what an interchange is, what the role of an interchange is. And indeed, we have three operators of the interchanges, which is the MUF'17 project, the Metro of Moscow, and the Russian railways. There are two ways of building interchanges, via tender or without a tender. As land is a precious asset, we normally organize tenders for building interchanges. We have two pilot projects that you can get acquainted with. We also provide land without a tender for large projects. In this case, there are several options for the operator. The operator can invest their own money, or they can bring other investors. And then now this commercial component that is part of the interchange, it is necessary not only to help the investor return the initial investment, but also it is necessary to develop the area around the interchange. It is also possible for the operator to issue shares in order to attract financing. And several projects of this type have already been implemented. There is also a technological part of this interchange that would always belong to the city. And we do think that it is going to be quite promising and attractive for the business community.
Thank you a lot. The issue that you capture is very important, and is one of the hottest topics at the moment, how you can actually take as the public entity some of the value that you generate by creating dense transit systems that clearly increase the value of the land. And it was very interesting to listen to your comment as well. So before it's getting late, we might be the last one. So if there are any questions or any clarifications that you would like to, can we give her the mic? Thanks.
Hello,
I'm the representative of citizens. Maybe I would like to ask the question of the Bureau of Designers. You spoke about the possible renovation of the station in front of Paveletsky station, railway station. I use the station near Kievskaya station, and you know. It will take 15-20 minutes to go from this station to Bersenevskaya embankment, and this is only 200 meters, you know, and if you go by car, it takes 45 minutes. Is it a good, successful project? How do you think? What about this interchange hubs? Who did it? I think it's not successful at all because it takes too much time now. Will you consider this in other interchange hubs? Thank you very much for your question. I will answer this question. So who wants to be responsible for answering this question? Maybe I will be responsible. As I know, the station so this square near Kievsky station, so many participants did this. Maybe 5 years ago, the Department of Transport tried to do something when they wanted to make some changes in transport traffic, but we did not work at this railway station. As you say, right, and I also spoke about this, and my colleagues spoke about this, these interchange hubs, as Kievskaya station, for example. These are places of a lot of traffic, play of people, and you know, cars and trains, and of course it is sad that you know, nothing is changed. But maybe also we know that this is a good project regarding Paveletsky station. Maybe instead of this foundation, something useful will appear at the Paveletsky station. Also, we started to make some efforts into construction of Belaruskaya station, which is also a hub. Now we can see that order. So it's more in order. I really hope that everything will be okay with Kievskaya station. You spoke about your car, your private car, but you should understand that at such territories there are many residentials, commercial sites. I meant the official parking lots. It's very difficult to get an access to this parking lots. I just wanted to say that this is the site which really attracts a lot of traffic, of people, of transport, and that's why we need to pay more attention to interchange hubs and to parking lots, of course. But we should still understand that not everybody will be able to park there, because you know, this is really a huge hub. But you are right, the situation is sad with this location, but we never worked at it yet. Also, I would like to add some other things. Yes, of course. I would like to add that Kievskaya station and the square, so near Kievskaya station, this is a very precise issue. You know, here there was the master plan, but here we should consider the interests of commuters, of citizens. The Paveletsky station, it's a result of a master plan, and master plan it's different from general plan. Master plan is a more valuable decision. Master plan is, you know, a set of interests. In master plan of Paveletsky station, there is a set of interests of different participants. That's why we solved this at Paveletsky station.
You want to comment, Andrei? So very last thing, and then we have to close because we are running out of time.
Я буквально коротко.
Just in brief, as an addition, I could say that, Moscow Architectura pays a lot of attention to transport scheme. At the initial stage, we already understand all the problems and we try to correct the mistakes which we had in the past. That's why we have a lot of requirements when we develop the transport scheme. We try to modulate transport flows in order to anticipate these possible problems.
Great, I think it was very interesting. We are running out of time, so unless we start doing the cleaning, we have to leave. So thanks a lot for, it was a very interesting discussion, and we hope to see you at the next Urban Forum. Thank you.
Спасибо.